The following is a special presentation of ABC Sports.
In Toronto, Ontario, Canada, the Indy cars are ready for round 9 of the PPG IndyCar World Series. The cars are set, and Jack Arute is at the front row.
Paul, when they dropped the checkered flag at Cleveland last week, this man, Paul Tracy, took the win and the momentum to his hometown of Toronto, Canada. On Friday in the first qualifying session, Tracy posted the fastest time, and it stood good enough for the pole position until there were only 17 seconds remaining in the qualifying of the second and final day, when this man, his teammate, Emerson Fittipaldi, unseated him from the pole position, leaving Team Penske in a rather unique situation. Fittipaldi, in desperate need of points, trying to chase down the points leader, Nigel Mansell, in the championship, gathered 1 point for getting the pole. His teammate, Tracy, is in the luxurious position of being able to go out and only be concerned about going for a victory, while his other teammate, Emerson Fittipaldi, has to be concerned about trying to chase Mansell down and score another championship for Team Penske. For more information on this great starting grid in Canada, let's go to my colleague in row 2, Gary Gerald.
Right behind the Penske cars, Jack, 2 veteran winning drivers who've established their best qualifying efforts thus far this season. Bobby Rahal trying to bounce back from the disappointment of a first-lap, first-turn incident that knocked him out of the race at Cleveland last week, inside in the second row. Rahal, 44 points behind Nigel Mansell, not conceding anything in a bid to defend his PPG IndyCar championship. But he knows that if he is to get back in contention, he needs a win, and one soon. Danny Sullivan alongside. Best qualifying effort in over a year. Sullivan, a winner at Detroit last month, has had great success here on the streets of Toronto. 3 times he has finished second. Twice he has finished third. He'd love to add a number 1 to that very impressive finishing record. Paul?
So the first 4 position, an interesting mixture. Great champions, and of course, the incredibly fast and skilled Paul Tracy. In the Indy cars, new names are being added to the list of contenders. Paul Tracy is the latest. At Phoenix, the Canadian Charger took the lead and put 2 laps on the entire field. But in the closing miles of the run, Tracy maneuvered under a slower car, took a chance on the pass, and lost. On the Long Beach streets 2 weeks later, Paul's aggressive give-no-quarter style paid off with the first victory of his IndyCar career. Many felt that once Paul saw his first checker, he would be unstoppable, and the accidents behind him. But as he rolled out for the start of the Indianapolis 500, Tracy's promise dimmed again. Like many who have gone before, his hopes ended against the wall. On the Milwaukee Mile, he qualified well, took the race lead, and for the 3rd time this season, he was the dominant factor in a race. But his day ended with another accident and another long walk back to the pits. Paul's youthful skill still needed some honing. Last week, it was the Burke Lakefront Airport in Cleveland, and for the 2nd time in his career, Paul had the pole. He fought with Nigel Mansell into the first turn, but as the rest of the field followed, so packed up that 3 separate incidents occurred in the first corner. It was still green for the leaders, and the hesitation gave Nigel Mansell the edge and the lead of the race. But it wasn't long before Tracy was back and around the world champion. The internal war at Gallus Racing continued. Little Al and his teammate Danny Sullivan clashed for the 2nd time this year, with Danny the loser. Mansell fell back to fight a classic side-by-side duel with Emerson Fittipaldi. The 2 great champions traded places for several laps. At the flag, Paul was pulling away, winning his 2nd race, and this time from the pole. Now we're in Canada, where they love their racing and its crop of IndyCar challengers. Vancouver's Ross Bentley starting his search for IndyCar acclaim. Toronto's own Scott Goodyear on the winning path with 1 IndyCar win. And Paul Tracy, greatness ready to happen. Today's fight is on the shores of Lake Ontario. It's the Molson Indy Toronto. The skyline of downtown Toronto and its signature, the CN Tower. It's a bright, beautiful day here in Canada. A light breeze blows off of Lake Ontario. Hello and welcome. welcome. I'm Paul Page. When the Indy cars began their series of road races in June at Detroit, Nigel Mansell had a commanding points lead, and one would presume because his background is road racing that he would extend that lead. Well, it simply hasn't happened. And during practice and qualifying here at Toronto, he's crashed more on this weekend than any other weekend in his career. And two of those accidents, nearly identical in the first turn, have caused damage to his race car. Added to that, he still has a visibly swollen wrist from his accident last week in Cleveland. And so there's the very real possibility that for the second time in the year, Nigel Mansell may lose the points lead, and it might happen here. Now, Sam Posey, we're talking a first two rows in which we have IndyCar champions. The third row takes on a different complexion.
Well, exactly. You could almost call it the row of the underdog. Johansson and Bosell both have exceptional abilities, but neither of them has yet managed to win an IndyCar race. Bosell has a background in Formula One. He won the World Sports Car Championship for Jaguar. He has run 52 IndyCar races. Johansson also has a Formula One background. He came to the IndyCar ranks about this point last year and showed competitive speed immediately. Either man could break through today, Paul, with a little luck, and it would be very welcome.
So we'll keep an eye on that third row. Now, Bobby Unser, we're talking a track here with an interesting layout.
Well, Paul, unlike last week in Cleveland where the track was wide open, Toronto is very narrow with cement barriers, leaving very little margin for error. It's also an extremely rough track where the drivers will be shifting gears approximately 2,000 times. Now, the combination of bumps and a tight circuit could cause a little havoc here today. Fuel consumption really shouldn't be a problem, and especially if we have a few yellows. Now, I can't remember when we've seen so many cars so closely bunched together at the top of the field. Now think about this. The first 9 cars are within 1 mile an hour of each other.
Here at the track, a tribute to Davey, Allison. A number of the cars, Robbie Gordon, Nigel Mansell, Mario Andretti, all carrying the number 28, Davey Allison's car number, in tribute and memoriam, a special tribute to the team. It was this past week that the brilliance of one of racing's stars was snuffed out. In a tragic helicopter accident at Talladega, Davey Allison died. The young man with the sparkling eyes, a handy smile, a friendly spirit, and marvelous racing skills leaves behind a vacuum that will be very difficult to fill. To his family and his friends, who had already suffered far too much, we send our sympathies.
The Molson Indy Toronto is brought to you by Molson. The call comes down from Canada. Crisp, clean, refreshing. Molson. Answer the call. By Ford and your Ford dealer. Have you driven a Ford lately? By Goodyear, #1 in tires. And by Haviland Formula 3 Motor Oil. Add more life to your car.
Back at Exhibition Place in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, the Indy cars are already fired and ready to go racing. On grid itself, the first 4 positions for the very first time this year are all held by the Chevy racing engine. As we take a look at the starting grid. The pole sitter is Emerson Fittipaldi, this year's Indy 500 winner, starting from his 14th career pole and his 3rd here at Toronto. Alongside his Penske teammate Paul Tracy, a hometown favorite coming off a convincing win in Cleveland. In row 2, it's Bobby Rahal, the defending PPG Cup champion, with his best starting position this year. Alongside Danny Sullivan, a pole starter here twice in 1988 and 1990. The 3rd row is Stefan Johansson. He was 11th in his debut here last season. And Raul Boisel. He stands 3rd in the PPG points chase, looking to close the gap. The 4th row is Al Unser Jr., a 2-time winner at this circuit. And Arie Luyendyk, the 1990 Indy winner, in search of his first road course win. The 5th row, Nigel Mansell, the current points leader who has struggled this weekend to find a handle on his race car. And Scott Goodyear, another hometown hero who won his first IndyCar race last year at the Michigan 500. In row 6, it's Teo Fabi. His best finish this season came at Long Beach, where he finished 4th. And Robbie Gordon, a young and aggressive charger. His best finish this season was a 3rd at Australia. In row 7, Mario Andretti, a 30-year IndyCar veteran. And Roberto Guerrero, having a frustrating season. In row 8, Bertrand Gachot and Andrea Montermini. The 9th row, Jimmy Vasser and Brian Till. In row 10, Scott Brayton and Scott Pruitt. Row 11, Willie T. Ribbs and Mark Smith. The 12th row, Kevin Kogan and Marco Greco. In row 13, Hiro Matsushita and Ross Bentley. And the 14th row, Johnny Unser and Jeff Wood. So that's the way they line up as you take a look from the front of Bobby Rahall's car. The race record here at 99 miles an hour. Michael Andretti won it last year. There's the fuel window, and fuel today could be critical. 103 laps, 300 kilometers, or 183 miles. Now, take a look at this. This requires a little study. The comparison of the Penske team and the Newman Haas team this year. At laps led figure, mostly due to Paul Tracy. But it seems that Newman Haas, with the help of Nigel Mansell for the most part, have been able to convert those finishes and laps led in their column to points for the PPG Cup. Now, Jack Arute, the drivers' meetings have been lively lately. What about this morning?
Paul, you'd have to characterize this one as somewhat uneventful. No discussion about the start. In fact, the only discussion was about what will constitute blocking. No major changes there. If you make one move, you're allowed to do that to cover your position. If you make two moves, that may be considered blocking. First offense, furled black flags pointed at the offender. Second offense, a stop-and-go penalty. But for the first time, actually only the third time this season, Nigel Mansell is not on the front row. On the way out, he spoke to the front row drivers. He referred to Paul Tracy, who was starting on the outside, and said, jump him on the start. The him was Emerson Fittipaldi. Remember Detroit?
Maybe somebody wants to sell the television rights to some of those drivers' meetings. We're lined up now, the PPG pace car in front, Johnny Rutherford at the wheel of the pace car, as the field is single file, and that gives you an idea just how tight this circuit is. Bobby Unser already referred to that. There are the Penske cars lined up in front. When Stefan Johansson takes the green flag, by the way, it will be the 1,000 start for the Chevy Indy V8 engine. So now they begin to come into alignment. The start-finish line, as the pace car pulls off, is actually in the middle of a curved main straightaway that is lined on the inside by the pits. The field pretty well aligned in the front row. Raul Boisel drops back just a bit. There's that curve. The green flag is just ahead of them. And there we go. The race is on in Toronto. Emerson Fittipaldi pulls way wide in the first corner. Everyone is through there safely to this point. The field continues safe on through, but Fittipaldi, by pulling wide, was able to get a little better run coming down this straightaway and leads them into the first of the real passing areas. Then Tracy, then Rahall, and then Danny Sullivan, followed by Johansson. Look at the Newman Haas cars going through the corner side by side. Andretti and Mansell.